Okay, today it's my pleasure to introduce you and myself actually to Robert Jones. This is the first time Robert and I have ever talked. We are friends of friends, and I know a couple of other people I talked with said, "Hey, Robert Jones at Lincoln, you need to contact him." And and I know Masaki. You guys may have seen my interview with Masaki, and I contacted him to say, "Hey, what do you think about Robert? And do you have contact information?" He said, "Oh my gosh, yeah, you need to reach out. He's a great guy." So Robert went to Eastern Washington University, got his organizational communications degree and a master's degree also in communication studies there. He is a college prep advisor at Lincoln High School, working with the College Success Foundation, and he is the sprints and relay coach on their track team. So without anything further, the way I run this is I want to ask you a few questions and then let you share your story. I want to mostly listen. So if you could share your background, maybe even going back into family background, parents and grandparents if it's pertinent, and then how race has played into that, and if you faced racism and so forth. So if you can maybe introduce yourself and share some of your background.
Sure. My name is Robert Jones. I am a product of the 253 Tacoma, born and raised. I am the son and the eldest of 7 kids to Robert and Debbie Jones. Um, uh, what else can I say? A product of Tacoma School District. I graduated from Truman, then transitioned on to Wilson, where then I transferred over to Spanaway Lake High School due to the fact that my dad, being a pastor, his obligations and commitment led him out towards Spanaway. And that's how I became part of the Spanaway community. And that's where I attended Spanaway Lake High School. From there, I ended up going off to Eastern Washington University, where I was a student athlete, participated in track and field, and then was able to get my master's and bachelor's degree from Eastern Washington University as well. Coming back home, after I was done, I wanted to get involved in community engagement, but wasn't sure exactly how that was going to look. And it just so happened that an opportunity came up. At the time, it was known as the Washington Education Foundation, and then had been changed to College Success Foundation. And so I was encouraged to apply. I did, was given the job, and was told that my duties would begin at Lincoln High School. And it's just so interesting, in school that I was not allowed to attend back when I was a teenager, just due to the social unrest and to the gang situations that were going on so high in Tacoma. My father just didn't think it was a good idea to send me to Lincoln High School. And so as of that, I did not go. But how things come full circle, that the school that I could not go to as a student is now the school that I get to go to make change. And so very thankful for how all of that has turned around. As far as my upbringing in the Northwest and being raised by African-American parents in the Northwest, our upbringing, we were very fortunate that even though there were 7 kids, we lived middle class to upper middle class. And that was just due to my dad working very hard, was strategic with his money, and was very concerned about where we lived as a family, but also concerned as a Black family that he wanted his family and kids to have resources and have access. And so as a result of it, my father made those sacrifices, but it came with some challenges. Oftentimes when you make a sacrifice like that for your family, you also put your family sometimes or your kids rather, in some challenging situations. So we ended up going to predominantly white neighborhoods where we did not have a lot of kids that look like us. So there was the adaptation of that, or people questioning, how did you get to live in this house, in this neighborhood? How was that happening? And it was those conversations that really started to awaken my eyes and know that everyone is not happy that we're here. And it was at that point that my dad says, I need to talk to you, that everyone here is not, just because they smile on your face does not mean that they're very supportive of the success that you are obtaining. And you need to know that, Robert. And at first I would have to say I was somewhat reluctant. I didn't want to think that race played a part in how people may have felt towards me. I think I intentionally wanted to be oblivious to know that, there's no way that people would judge me just based off of race. My race, my color doesn't have anything to do with it, only to find out that it didn't matter how much education you had or how well you spoke or how well you could carry yourself or your decorum in the community. None of that seemed to matter. When if someone had race locked into their mindset, then their actions were soon going to follow. And unfortunately, that was a talk that my father wanted to have with us. And it was more of, I think, 15, 16 years old, where he started having these conversations that, Robert, I don't want you to look at everyone who's not Black and to think they're wrong, because that's not the case. But the reality is that everyone's not happy or glad of where and how you live. And they're not going to be glad and happy of where you're going. And there's a lot of that, unfortunately, is just based on what our country was brought on. It was deceit. It was taking of others and making others feel less than. And he says there's remnants of that still continue in our country, but you need to know how to decipher between those who are for you and those who are not. And that was a very hard process for a couple of years, because I just automatically thought that people would just like you if you're respectful and you did the right thing. But even to do the right thing, even to have good grades, even to be respectful and all the things that you would think it takes, it just seemed like for me as a Black man, there was more to it until I really found out what that missing part was. And so my dad, as a believer, his faith, I believe that really helped out, that he did not convey those lessons with hatred or malice, but it was conveyed with love and instruction, and also in patience. And also too, with, I would say, transparency, that he didn't do everything right. And there was times that situations, even as a Christian man, how things bothered him. And he yet still said, we still have to want to find love, and you still have to allow God to lead you in this and not to your own actions. So those were some of my introductions onto race relations early on.
Okay. Couple of things from that. One, being the oldest of 7 kids, was there a kind of sense of responsibility that either fell on you or that you felt to the younger brothers and sisters, and maybe even a protectiveness to being extra sensitive to what your siblings may have faced racially? And then, since your dad was a pastor, oftentimes people say that Sunday morning is the most segregated hour in America, right? Was it a predominantly Black church? And was there efforts made to have some integration? Would you touch on those 2 aspects?
Yeah, I'll start off with the latter first. It was a predominantly Black church, Pentecostal influenced. However, my parents made it clear that they wanted others to come and worship. And there would be times that my dad will go out of his way to invite other pastors of other denominations, other ethnicities, and they would gladly come. But I think because it was predominantly Black and we were charismatic, it wasn't a very quiet church. It was one with emotion, but good teaching. It just wasn't emotional. There was good instruction along with it. But I think that in many ways, people probably wouldn't say it, but I think it was a distraction to some degree. And a lot of times people go where you feel familiar at. It's just, it's human nature. And I think that conversation started around high school too, when I started noticing, like, why is it that we talk about that we're brothers and sisters, but why is it that the Lutheran church over there, they have predominantly whites over there. The Korean Baptist church over there is mostly Korean. This church over here is mostly Black, but yet we all say we love the same God. But when we interact in the community, are we really exhibiting those things that we read? Are we being more of a hearer, more of a doer, or more of a hearer of the word? And for me at that point, I just started to see that there was just some integrity that was just that was being questioned. It just didn't make sense to me how we could say that we truly love God, but if I want to date someone outside my race, now it's an issue. And this is people within the church, right? And people all say they love God, or whatever the case may be. And those type of things really started to raise questions. It was at that point, I would say back in 2009, 2010, my father had the opportunity to rebuild the church that we were currently in, and wanted to change the outside of it aesthetically to make it more appeasing to different types of people. He wanted all to come. And it really was a great plan in which to do. It definitely brought in different classifications of people to come in. And so there was this interest now where people were like, man, this is a beautiful building. But now they were obviously seeing what was making the building so beautiful was the word, it was the instruction, was the ministries that were inside the church. But I remember even then, as people came, I think people were still somewhat reluctant. And we started to see more and more adaptation of white families or even Asian families coming and visiting. But as far as them staying, I think culturally, it was still overwhelmingly Black that were some people just felt like, well, I don't feel like it can really speak to me.
Mm-hmm.
It was at those moments that my dad sat down with us and we explained to him, as we said, that all of us in our friendships, our friendship pool is pretty diverse. And we started realizing that we have the influence to maybe bring our friends to come, and that if they really trusted us, that they would follow us and they would come to youth ministry service, or they would come to a special evening service that we have for the community. And we started to see some changes that were happening there, because us as kids were starting to use our own influence to bring our peers to come to church, and not getting caught up in the fact that it's a predominantly Black church.
Mm-hmm.
It's a service that you can go to that just happens to have a lot of Black people there. Mm-hmm. And so we try to change that narrative in that way.
Okay. And then
Yeah.
How about being the older brother?
Being the older brother, 7 kids. I mean, to this day, I still honor the position that I hold. Some people say that I may take a little bit overboard and I might be too worried or too concerned about it, but I always was with the understanding that if I was born as the eldest, there's a reason for it and there's significance for it. And I just always felt that God placed me in this position because there were some things in me that I could give to my siblings. And it doesn't mean that I can only give and they can't give to me. I just believe that for whatever reason, he placed me here for some unique skill sets that I have to help my sisters and my brothers. As far as with race relations with them, all of us grew up going to school in Spanaway in the Bethel School District. I mean, being pretty diverse, our friendship pool was the whole gamut. Mm-hmm. So we didn't have an issue as far as with us as peers socializing amongst ourselves. That wasn't the issue. I made sure that when I went off to college, I tried to really communicate with my brothers and sisters and stay in contact with them, but also would reveal to them what that world was like. Mm-hmm. And in doing so, though, I never tried to make it seem, make it seem as if though that other races didn't matter or that our own race didn't matter. I think for me, the one time that it did escalate, and I say escalate where it became heightened, maybe mm-hmm. escalate's the wrong word, but where it was heightened is when I brought a young lady home that was of a different race. Mm-hmm. And I know my sisters in particular were shocked, but they were like, well, we've never seen you date anyone outside your race. And do you not like Black women? Do you not mm-hmm. care for us? And my response was, absolutely, that's not true at all. Mm-hmm. I said, the most powerful woman in my life is my mom. So are we going to have this debate? Mm-hmm. This just happened to be someone that I just happen to like, and we have some common interest. And even though I see race, I've never been one to say, well, I don't see race, because I believe that is, it's an excuse. Mm-hmm. You choose if you say, I don't see race. And I just believe that we see race. Mm-hmm. If a cop pulls you over, he sees race off the top. And so that to me has been something that I've always tried to excuse, is that I acknowledge race, but I don't try to use it as a scapegoat or to try to use it as something to be disrespectful on. Mm-hmm. As Dr. King said, it comes down to your character. So even with my brothers and sisters, even if it was someone that I was dating that they may not have thought I should have been with at the time, over time they realized on how I was treating the person or how the person was treating me, that, oh, what truly matters is what's inside. Mm-hmm. And I think it became apparent is like, well, if I'm doing this on how you date someone outside your race, is this how I may be when someone comes and enters our church that's of a different race?
Right.
I think it opened up dialogue for us to go there. and to just be very transparent.
Awesome. In your role as an academic advisor, success coordinator, oftentimes that is, gearing towards college, which obviously the educator, I think, is extremely important. So talk to me about the importance of education, but also then maybe other opportunities and paths that you try and encourage people to go down.
The question is, what's the importance of education?
Education, and maybe if there's somebody who doesn't want to take that path, what are other things you might encourage people towards?
Yeah, so my role as a college prep advisor in trying to encourage low-income first-gen students to make the transition from high school to college, there are a lot of complexities. Whether you are low-income first-gen or if you come from an affluent background with two educated parents, the college process is daunting and can be complex and can be right down frustrating. So the role that I serve at Lincoln, I think, has been key in many kids making the transition from high school to college. But that, obviously has been in support with the career and guidance counselors that are at the school, along with the admin staff and staff members. The one thing that I really try to convey to the students, especially students of color, is that an education can unlock so many opportunities in that you don't have, just because you may be African American or someone of color, it doesn't have to just be sports is that the only way you can find success. There are so many other ways that education can prove that it can make it happen, and it can change your family generational trajectory as well. And that's the other thing that I really try to emphasize, is that this is just not about you. You are really honestly breaking a cycle within your family to let them know that someone has done it and it begins with you and now others can follow. So I really try to emphasize that and really try to instill that into young people, that they can carry that and understand that what they're doing is much more than them. And then those are those students that don't see themselves actually going to a 2-year community college or to a 4-year. They don't see themselves being a college student and staying and completing a degree. Some kids just want to go and work and be a part of society and go on with their life. And so there might be kids that we try to encourage to go get a trade or a specialized skill that will be able to compensate them, throughout life as well. So we try to encourage those that, regardless of if it's going to trade, the military, or to a 2-year or 4-year, the whole purpose is you have to have a plan, period. We have to start with a plan on what that's going to look like. Then what are the action items that we need to accomplish for that plan to actually be successful? And whether that is a 2-year, a 4-year, if that is the military or technical, what is it and how is that we're going to make this happen? And so those are the things that we instill. And so whether a person tells me that I don't see myself going on to college, I said, well, you may not see yourself going on to college, but trust me, if you go to a job or the military, education won't stop. You may not like it in the form of how it's being presented to you this way, but if you go to this box over here or this box over here, all three of these, military, school, or career, they're all going to at some point say that you're going to need to get more education. So I just try to encourage kids where they're at, whatever their pathway may be, try to encourage them, give them the best information we can so they can really make the best informed decisions, and then go from there.
Great. Would you give me your definition of the term racism?
Wow. My definition of racism is just where one particular race thinks they're superior over another race, or races, due to their skin color. And I think racism has also embedded some ignorance in of those who choose to not want to become educated and want to stay stuck or stay in their lane of what they know and don't want to be open to growth, change, or challenges. And so when I look at that, not only is it a race that thinks they're superior, but it's also a mindset that has become, I would say, arrested in its development.
Yeah, and ignorance is not not having intellectual ability. It's just not wanting to learn about certain things, right? Or not being informed about it. So that's been one of the biggest things I've learned in this process with these different conversations. Is it's easy to being a white man, not going through and living the experience of being a person of color, thinking, well, maybe this is an isolated incident here or there, but when you hear the common themes of conversation after conversation, it's really enlightened me, and I've become much better informed and hopefully much more empathetic. So do you believe that people of all races can be racist, or do you have to be are whites the only group that can be racist, for instance?
I've battled with that because I think the way that it's always been conveyed or shared is that it came more from whites towards other races, primarily Black. So that was always my belief. But I do believe that there are races out, or cultures out there, ethnicities out there that may believe that, hey, the way I view it, or the way I've been brought up, is that we're more superior than whites, or we're more superior than Asians. I believe that that can happen with any race, based on their actions and how they carry it out. If it's not about equality and equity, and if it's about what is that we do that's better than you, what is that you do that's not as good as us, and if it's that comparison that continues, then I think we have a problem of racism that exists, whether it could be Black, white, or whatever. And I know some people would probably, the pundits on the more intellectual levels will probably disagree, but I've seen kids that have made comments towards other races, whether it was Blacks towards whites, and I had to tell them that that's not right. I don't agree with what you're saying and how you're going about doing it. And even though they were kids that I love, and they were kids that I was working with, I had to let them know that that particular saying or what you're doing is I don't agree with. And again, that also comes in once you identify it and you recognize it. Now you have to help with repairing it. Okay, well, why is this not right? I can't just share with you that it's wrong. What am I trying to give you that lets you know that this is wrong? And that, for me, has been the big piece. So whether it is young African-American kids that I see that are doing things that might be negative towards other races or cultures, just because what we're going through, I have every right still to address wrong when wrong is wrong. And that's what I try to do.
And I mean, what we're looking for is justice, right? And when there's justice, you speak up against things that are wrong, whoever it is. I love the education piece. And you said, even if it's, these people that I love, I think maybe even more so because it's those people I love, right? And we're called to, when we see something wrong or hear something wrong, speak out. And that's where I think people in my position maybe have just been silent for too long. Maybe you hear something and you don't say something, or maybe as a white man, maybe I'm afraid to speak up on race because I feel like, well, that's a touchy subject or whatever. But I think that's now, as things are developing, I think that's an area where I need to get better, right? And society needs to get better. Is if you don't say something, that's just as bad as maybe the person saying something, right?
Right. Absolutely.
So, yeah. What are some ideas that you have to move our country forward? It could be legislative ideas, educational ideas, whatever your thoughts are. I'm sure you've put into like, hey, how could our country move forward? What are some of those ideas that you have?
Wow, that is a big question. I guess I have to address it basically where I feel that I have immediate impact at, and that's in the education sector. And are you referring that to the social unrest, the pandemic, both, or just?
You can go either place. My focus is more on the social unrest, but the pandemic certainly has played into this whole thing. In fact, without the pandemic, you and I aren't sitting here talking, right?
Absolutely.
Being
Yeah,
comfortable,
absolutely.
being on Zoom and all those kind of things. This is a blessing, I think, that has come from the negative of the pandemic.
I agree 100% in that. There's people that I've been in communication with that I know for a fact, had it not been COVID, it would have never happened. So I agree with that 100%. I think to the social unrest and how our country can move forward. Listening to several pundits and intellectuals that have been talking about this. Angela Rye has been, she is a social activist, commentator, and she's been giving a lot of input. Different ones around the country that I've been listening to at times, different people that come on CNN that report out. And one of the things that kind of stuck to me was about thoughtful conversation. It has to be platforms that have been created or are going to be created for thoughtful conversation. And that has to be the starting place. I think to implement documents and this needs to happen immediately. You could talk about changes or defunding police and all these things that are going on. But if we're not really sitting down and just having conversations so you can hear my heart and I can hear your heart, and if we're just trying to get to policy changes right away, but then expecting people to change after, you're going to have some reluctancy that people are like, well, listen, we had to go through all these changes, but because we never really sat down at the table and really talked about it, I'm not willing to change. We've given you all that we feel you need, so therefore you need to take this and be happy. That's kind of like how I've been processing some of it, is that it's in one aspect, yeah, let's make all these changes. Let's make these changes now. But are we also talking about, hold on, before we make these changes, are we doing anything to bring along community conversations? And not just a conversation here or there, but I mean, are we being strategic in bringing people together? Are we bringing all white educators together and talking about what is their true feeling on teaching students of color? What do they experience? What do they feel? Are we bringing policymakers together with people from the community of color and having them have dialogue with a mediator that can help create a flow of conversation where we can take some of that rich information and now incorporate that into action items or to some steps that will get us to a conclusion and to how we can become better. And I know some people are like, well, we've done enough talking, but the fact is you have a lot of people that are open, they just don't know where to begin. And I think instead of barking or telling people, well, you should have known this is how we feel and this is what we've been dealing with, this is a time for everyone to say, hey, we're admitting that there obviously needs to be changes. We're also willing to make the choice to come and sit down. Let's all come sit down and share, and let's be open. Let's be open to those that may not think like us or may not share like us and hear what they have to say. Because at the end of the table, you want everyone to come to the table that's able to bring something that will bring improvement to what's going on in our society. And I think if we started within our own communities, if it goes statewide, if it goes regionally, and then it goes nationally, I think once you hit on those different phases, you can start to see a trend that is happening. I think the sports world is trying to take its platform and utilize it to really create conversation. And I think the message that's being sent is that whatever your platform is, just as you on this Zoom meeting here, Dan, I mean, you've created a platform where you're able to create conversation. I think everyone needs to use their platform for that to take place. If you are a coach and you know that you have influence with other coaches, the platform can be that, hey, we need to talk about how are we interacting with our students? Do we treat our students that are not this color versus different than others? Do we hear things that go on our teams and we turn a blind ear to it because we don't want to address it? Or are we stopping and using that moment as a life lesson there to teach our kids? So instead of this happening and feeling like it has to be on CNN or it has to be on a Zoom call, what are you honestly doing with your influence in your platform where you can start to create those conversations? And I think from there, that will be the initial part to where our country can start coming to some kind of change and opening up to say, we want change. Because right now, what happened over a month and a half ago, I mean, yes, it was an eye-opener for all of us. Black, white, it doesn't matter. But now that has happened, and with the marches and the protests have all began, and we've definitely got the awareness out of what and how people feel, what now are we going to do to sustain that to where the momentum doesn't die because no longer is, the killings in the street happening and the cameras not following us? Is that same mindset, is that same hard drive still there to take your small platform and utilize it for healthy, thoughtful, and challenging conversation to where now we can move to next steps? I think that's where our country can start to move to something bigger and better.
Great. And part of the reason I chose the first word is listen is I think we have to define what we mean by that also, because the conversations, if you're there to listen, to hear and then respond, that's different than listening to understand and to have empathy, right? And so I think listening to hear and understand is a big important piece. I'll let you choose one of these two. Either speak to people of color, maybe young people of color, or to the white community? If you had a message to send to either, and if you want both, you can, but what would be your message to either group?
If I was going to say something to the white community starting off, I would say that, first of all, we welcome this movement, and I don't even want to say movement because as LeBron James said it so eloquently, that this is not a movement, it's a lifestyle. You know, it's a human lifestyle. I would say to the white community that if you are looking for a way in how change can happen or you want to make contributions, I would think the first thing is being open to dialogue. And it doesn't have to be where you have to wait for someone Black to get something started. You can create your own platform and the influence that you have. If it's in your heart and you feel it, trust me, like they say, you build it and they will come. And I really believe with the right heart, I believe whatever comes from the heart in a positive way will reach the hearts of those in a positive way. And so if you're looking for how do I get started or how do I do this or what should I say, my encouragement is just get started. Those who are like-minded and those who see what you're doing will come join and support you. Sometimes it's just that initial step of just stepping out on faith and just believing and trusting God that this is something coming from my heart and I know nothing bad can come from this. So I'm going to believe that I'm going to step out and just see what happens. Or it is taking that step of courage and coming out your comfort zone and calling, say, an organization or reaching out to, say, some Black businesses and asking, how can you support? That's where it's going to come. And now that you may know and you've come to and you're aware that this does happen and you're aware that there are injustices that are taking place. And just because we had a Black president doesn't mean that racism is eradicated. It just means more now that we are at a point where America is open to say that we want change. All of America? No. But a large part of America? Yes. And I can't say I wasn't born in the 60s, but I can only assume in the 60s, I don't think this was happening at the level it is now. So it shows you the growth and the impact of what has already happened. But I think now for whites and those who are entitled and have advantages and influence, use your voice. If you see that there are things that are wrong, injustices that are taking place, don't just stand back and not say anything. Don't just turn away or don't feel as if though my voice won't matter. It does. And the same, I would say to the young Black community, for those that are there, that every person you see that is white or any ethnicity is not a bad person at all. And yes, what has happened in our society has been hard. It's been hard to see. It's been hard to talk about. It's been hard to think about. But the fact is there are people in this world, in our society that want change. And some of the major movements in our country that were started and a lot of times give Blacks to credit, a lot of them were helped initiated and co-started by whites who put their own lives on the line because they knew the greater cause. So I think it's important for everyone to realize is that in just my faith, and it goes back to the whole analogy of Sunday being the most segregated day of the week, if we so-called to say that we had, Jesus in our heart, it's hard for me to know that how is it you so-called say you're a believer, but the attributes that you display don't align with that at all. And it's just been one of those things that we have literally kind of put in the back room, so to speak, when it comes to race, because we know the pain that comes with it. We also know the deceit and really the deep rooted history that comes with it as well. And I think both parties have to be bold enough and courageous enough to hear and to listen, and then be willing to talk about then what are some proactive steps that we can implement to move forward. And it can't just be a one-time thing. It has to be a commitment where consistency is really the key of this in order to bridge that gap together.
Great. I'm a believer as well, and I think you've referenced James. I think maybe chapter 5 talks about being doers of the word, not just sayers, right? And if you're not, you're a double-minded man. So Last thing here, what gives you the greatest hope moving forward? And then if there's anything else that you want to have as a kind of closing comment or something you want to touch on, I'll let you close us out.
What gives me the greatest hope moving forward? Oh my gosh. What gives me the greatest hope moving forward is when you do see so many young people of all races that are coming together and just really almost putting their own lives in danger for this cause. That to me has been impressive. Just the sincere, the sincere concern that the young people have for where our country is at, but also knowing that their youth and their influence can make some major moves. When I look at the passing of Congressman John Lewis, who was laid to rest today in Atlanta, and you look at where his journey began, it began being impressed by Dr. King as a young 20-year-old man from Mississippi, and how he just kind of dedicated his life for the cause. And it just kind of showed that this didn't start when he was 35, 45. This started when he was in his early 20s. And he kept this because it wasn't a Black Lives Matter movement. It was a lifestyle. And I would just say that that would be the thing to our young people that are starting off on this, and you are really about social justice and reform and in so many aspects, is that just to please understand, what is your why in doing this? What is your why for doing it? Is your why just for right now because it seems like the thing to do? Or is this really deep rooted in your morals and your value system, that this is a lifelong commitment? And I seeing that for some of these young people, it gives me hope that this can turn around. Now, will it turn around in my lifetime? I don't know. But do I think changes are happening? And I think young people are brave enough now to say enough is enough. I think we're at that point where these young people here are not taking it anymore. They're willing to say enough is enough. We want to be educated, but we want to have the courageous conversation to move this thing forward. And then your last part, I think you said, is what could I leave for this conversation today?
Yep.
All what's taken place, all the things that are taking place today, it comes down to a choice. I heard someone say this: I can either go through COVID or I can grow through COVID. I can go through COVID, and I was thinking it was Pastor J.F. Wilkerson for Church of All Nations said, or I can grow through COVID. And anytime you have growth, there's going to be some uncomfortable feelings, some pain that happens because it's doing something that is not actually, comfortable, which means you have to grow. And I believe that people during this time where it seems uncomfortable, you have the chance to grow along with it. And there's going to be some growing pains, but once, and so to speak, that baby is birthed, the joy that comes from it, all the pain, all the things you had to do, the swelling of the feet, all the tribulations that go along with it, when it's born, the beauty and the tears and the joy that comes from it. But you would have never been able to have the tears and joy if you never went through the hard times it took to get to that point, to really respect what you see in front of you. And I think it's the same thing for us. I think that we have to be committed to the fact that this is just not some whimsical moment that I'm enduring right now for this summer. This is a lifestyle, and this aligns with my morals, my values about making change, not better just for me, but for my neighbor, my brother, my sister, my church member, my student. Those are the people that we're fighting for, those who don't have a voice, those that can't speak up. So for those that do know, those that can, this is our chance to come together and actually say, let's make change. But to me, the success and the special ingredient of that will be love. Love it encompasses all. And I believe that if we really adapt the fact of love, like I truly love you as a person, I believe that we could see this thing speed up so much faster.
Yeah, that's one of my last words there, and scripture says a lot to say about love is patient, love is kind, it keeps no record of wrongs, and the list goes on from there. So great final word. Robert, it's been a pleasure to meet you and get to hear your thoughts, and I hope this is not our last conversation.
Likewise. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you.